The title of this video is for Lubavitch Yeshivos, the Matzav in Lubavitch. It is being given by Dovid Klein. The copyright is owned by Dovid Klein and is being given on Yud Aleph Tishrei Toshin Ayin Beis. The purpose of this video is to describe the Matzav in Lubavitch, and more specifically to compare the situation before Gimel Tammuz and the situation after Gimel Tammuz for the last 17 years, which I'm not going to go through the whole 17 years, but really more specifically to focus on the current Matzav in Lubavitch, and to try to attempt to make some suggestions as to how the situation in Lubavitch can be improved, which there's no doubt about it, it definitely has to be improved. Very briefly, I just want to say that the Rebbe is the Manhig in the Lamayla, as is stated in Chassidus, Lubavitch Chassidus form, and specifically there's a Sicha from Yud Shvat Toshin Chavav. 1 second. Yeah. Yud Shvat Toshin Chavav. And it's a really fantastic Sicha because it describes very beautifully, of course, it describes very beautifully what the situation is after the stalkus of a Rebbe, and how one can be very makusher to the Rebbe after the stalkus. And I highly suggest that you get that Sikha and learn it. Once again, it's Yud Shvat Toshin Chavav. And actually, I have it in a sefer that recently came out from Kahas called Staying the Course, which that sefer has a good number of my Mormon Sikhas of Lubavitcher Rebbeim, and it focuses on this point of Iskashus to the Rebbe after the Stalkus. And I suggest you learn it many times because it's a great source of strength for Iskashus. 1 second, look at my notes. Before Gimel Tammuz, there was a totally different Matzav in Lubavitch. As a matter of fact, from my personal viewpoint, it was the exact opposite of what it is today. The Rebbe, being just a gigantic tzaddik, the biggest tzaddik, and there's no words to describe the godless of the Rebbe, whether it's neshama or his seichel, his form and everything. And every Lubavitcher back then had a very close personal relationship with the Rebbe. And the Rebbe was really leading everybody and everything with a real force and power. And just about everything in Lubavitch was functioning in a very concerted fashion. The Rebbe was giving out directions to every Lubavitch Mosid, answering tons of letters to individuals, and so forth. Everybody knows about this already. And everything was just flowing in Lubavitch back then in a really beautiful way. There was tremendous a tremendously much larger amount of achdus between Hasidim in Lubavitch back then. You know, at every local Lubavitch shul or Chabad house, you know, everything was united under the Rebbe and focused on the Rebbe, and everybody, of course, you know, people are people, so there's always the arguments and disagreements and friction between certain people and others. But besides that, in general, everything was just really flowing, just much, much better in Lubavitch back in those days. And every time the Rebbe would come out to give a sicha, or for bringing, there was a hookup, and we'd all go to the local Lubavitch shul, and you know, and in those days we didn't have video, so we used to just hear the hookup over the telephone, and one second. When there were disputes between people in Lubavitch in those days, oftentimes people wrote to the Rebbe asking what to do, and the Rebbe would mediate between the people, between the Hasidim. And another big factor back then was that, is well documented in Lubavitcher's forum, that the Rebbe had all kinds of mitzvah campaigns he was coming out with all the time, and every time the Rebbe came out with a campaign of any kind, everybody was taken up with that. And there was a definite hierarchy in Lubavitch, a definite structure, and I have a pamphlet that I got from Kahos a number of years ago, called The Brief Biography of Rishon Zalman of Liadi. And it's a little pamphlet, but it was based on a chassid, Rav Gershon Kranzler's his talks with the Rebbe. So really, the ultimate marker of that pamphlet is from the Rebbe. And in that pamphlet, Rav Gershon Kranzler, when he's describing the Lubavitch movement, says that Lubavitch movement is centered around Lubavitcher Rebbe. So everything was focused and centered around the Rebbe in those days, and Hasidim in the world were just functioning on a much more unified and a much higher level, and it was totally different than today. After Gimel Tammuz is when the situation gradually started to change. There's a definite, one second, I want to check the time. From my personal viewpoint, the biggest difference between now and then is the amount of hashpah that was coming out from one central place. Back then, in a chassid's life, today, even though we try our utmost in every possible way to have our personal skashers to the Rebbe, but it's much more limited because we have to make all the effort, whereas before the Rebbe was was just giving us this gigantic hashpah all the time, and we were all being makabel hashpah, and it was an ideal situation. And now every individual, besides different shiurim he might go to or for brangins, he has to kind of seek out the hashpah he's getting on his own. And there's no one central place or group of rabbanim that everybody's looking to for hashpah. And actually, that's one of the suggestions I'd like to make, that I really think a fantastic idea for Lubavitch would be if a number, a good number, or even a large number or a smaller number of big Lubavitch rabbanim and mashpim would get together and design programs of a constant hashpah of Torah and Chassidus and everything that a Jew needs to be a Lubavitcher Chassid. And there has to be something to fill the void. For example, one time I was talking to a Lubavitch Mashpia and Lubavitch Yeshiva, and he said, and he knew the Rebbe very well from back then, and he said that now there's a definite void that was left by this Dalkas of the Rebbe. And as the Rebbe himself said in the minor for Yud Shvat, Toshin Yud Aleph, that cautiously Lukin Shel Sadikim Yosim Yichurban Beis HaMikdash. And so, one second. So the first thing that I think Lubavitch needs and must have is a central place, which would most logically be a group of big rabbanim and mashpim, to design programs on a constant, regular basis of giving every single Lubavitcher in the world the hashpah that he needs. In Hayom Yom, the Frierdiker Rebbe writes and the Rebbe brings that the rabbanim of the generation are the rosh of the generation, and the Frierdiker Rebbe says that gufa basar reisha azul, the body goes after the head. So the ultimate responsibility for the furthering and development and welfare of every single Lubavitcher Chassid is really up to the Rabbanim, the Lubavitcher Rabbanim. Of course, every other group has their Rabbanim, but we're talking about Lubavitch. 1 second, I want to check the time. And I'd just like to say that that in potential, Lubavitch has a lot going for it, but the difficulty is that a lot of it remains a potential and it's not being actualized. And we all need to pull together and come together individually and generally speaking to really accomplish a Ma'aseh Ikr, like the Rebbe always said, to accomplish what Lubavitch can really accomplish.